Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Yes, you are. You are, yes, you are. Oh, such a good boy. Oh, go on then. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Measle and the Wrathmonk by Ian Ogilvy, illustrated by Mould and published by Oxford University Press. Today we're going to be reading chapter, I think it's 5 we're on now. Yeah, let's just double check. Pretty sure it's chapter 5. Yeah, chapter 5, The Thing. This is where we now find out what's up in those rafters. So let's go. In fact, there's a little hint for you right away. Oh, what does that look like to you? The town hall had something in common with the long, low railway shed near the coal heap. Of course, it was much bigger and from the outside appeared to have 3 stories, but inside it was the same as the shed, completely empty. Just a large square space with a high ceiling and a bare, new-looking plywood floor. The group picked a corner to settle down in. William sat down in his suitcase. Frank put his electrician's toolbox down by the hall, and Kip stood watching them, his heavy carpenter's bag dangling from one massive hand and his chainsaw and the red fuel can from the other. It strikes me that we're quite a useful little crowd, he said. Here we've got a professional electrician, another fellow with a lot of great books, and I'm a carpenter, and a pretty good one. We've got a lady who knows about Wrathmonks. Just a bit, said Prudence modestly. Well, more than the rest of us, said Kip. Plus, and it's a big plus, we've got somebody with a cool head and a quick brain. You're too kind, murmured Lady Grant. Kip laughed. No disrespect, Lady Grant, but I was talking about young Measle here. Oh, said Lady Grant. Oh, well, of course he's very clever, and sweet, and brave, and very dirty, and with a haircut that defies description, but nevertheless we all owe him a vote of thanks. Measle felt his face going red again. It seemed to be doing that a lot lately. Kip said, We do indeed, Lady Grant. Thank you for reminding us. And at last but not least, we have a young lady who, if she's wearing the right uniform, knows a lot about a whole bunch of things. So far, Measle thought, little Kitty Webb only seemed to know how to cry. She also seemed to know how to stick herself very close to him. She was there now, right by his side. Measle realised that she hadn't left since the moment they revived her. Kip said, Yep, pretty useful bunch. Maybe we could put our talents together, do something about getting out of here. Lady Grant sighed. It's a nice thought, she said, but let's face facts. We're 2 centimetres tall, we're stuck on top of a table with no way of getting down from it, and the complete mercy of that terrible, revolting thing in the rafters. Measle couldn't contain himself any longer. What is the thing in the rafters? He said, so loudly that Lady Grant stopped talking immediately. She, along with all the others, looked at Measle for a moment, as if wondering whether or not to tell him. Frank said, We don't like to talk about it, Measle, but I guess you'd better know. You're going to find out sooner or later anyway. He stared at Measle, his face serious. The thing in the rafters is a bat. A bat? Measle frowned, puzzled. Bats weren't scary at all. At least, not to Measle. They were just cute little furry things that flew about, eating insects and hanging upside down when they were asleep, looking like Basil's umbrella. Frank saw Measle's frown. Yes, I know. What's so scary about a bat? Nothing, unless you're 2 centimetres tall. Then they're very scary things indeed. Horrid, revolting things, said Lady Grant, no matter what size you are. And this one is not a normal bat. It's certainly not like any bat I've ever seen. Nothing like it mentioned in my encyclopedias, said William. This one has legs, said Kip. with talons on the end of them, like an eagle's. No bat I ever saw had talons. Ordinary bats snatch their prey with their mouths, said William. This one grabs its prey with its great curved claws and then carries it away, up into the rafters. Very nasty piece of work. I don't mind telling you. Dear oh dear. Yep, even worse than my boss. Kitty began to cry again. She did it very quietly, burying her face into Measle's sleeve. It comes out at night, she whispered, her voice muffled, so that only Measle heard her. It comes out at night and eats us. It didn't eat you, said Measle, hoping that Kitty would stop crying. She was making his shirt sleeve damp. It ate a lot of others, said Kitty. Measle looked at the group of people. They all had very serious faces, and some of them were staring at the floor. Measle said, There were others? About 20, said Frank. All sorts of people from all walks of life. They were the unlucky ones. They got caught by the thing when they were still human, before the plastic took over them. You see, once you're plastic, the thing doesn't bother you. It can't eat plastic. Meantime, while you're still human, you hide, said William. Measle thought about this for a moment. Then he said, But you were all outside when Frank and I found you. So was Frank, when I found him. You weren't undercover. So how come the bat didn't get you when you were all still human? Lady Grant said, We were undercover, all of us, most of the time, especially at night, of course, particularly as we felt ourselves getting stiffer and stiffer, but once we were unable to move at all, then that revolting tramplebone dragged us out from our hiding places with a gigantic pair of tweezers. Very nearly ruined this suit of mine. It's Chanel. Handmade and quite expensive. One simply cannot pull it around the way he did and then expect it to look nice. Anyway, once he'd gotten us out, he simply placed us wherever he felt like. Look, said Frank quietly. He was pointing outside the window. It was dark outside. That thing will be coming out soon, said William. He made a kind of chair from his encyclopedias using two small piles of books to fashion a pair of armrests for himself. He was sitting in the contraption looking comfortable. Measle noticed that the location William had chosen for himself was as far from the windows of the town hall as possible. I think I want to see it, said Measle. I want to see the bat. Okay, said Frank. You'll be safe if you squat down by the window. Aren't you going to watch for it too? Said Measle, hoping for some companionship. I've seen it, said Frank. Too many times. And we all have, Measle. Measle went to one of the tall windows and sat down, his nose just reaching the windowsill. He peered out at the gloom. He could still see the statue in the town square and the trees that surrounded it, but the houses on the other side of the square were lost in the gathering darkness. For the first time in a very long while, Measle felt despair creeping over him. His life up until now had been pretty miserable, but Measle was not the sort of person to feel sorry for himself. But now, the future seemed very bleak. He wondered how long they could all survive this. Not long, surely. A few weeks at most, before the sparse number of carrots he had left in the paper bag ran out, and then what? Starvation, followed by a few desperate meals of doughnuts and pink lemonade, and the creeping paralysis, with them all ending up like the big carpenter kept level. Eventually Measle reasoned the plastic would take over completely and there would be no more breathing, which meant he supposed death. If he couldn't breathe, he died. It was unthinkable. I had to be aware of this terrible situation. Then he heard it. A distant flapping. Not of wings, which make a soft, feathery sort of sound. No, this flapping noise was different. There was something hard about the sound, as though the wings of this flying creature were made of not soft feathers, but some kind of stiff leather. There was a distant crack, 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 as it came nearer, and Measle thought he could hear a whooshing sound as the wings beat through the air. Then there was a shape, high above the town. Even at this distance, Measle could see it was big. He could just make out the wings of the creature batting back and forth as it circled above the buildings. They were wide and black and menacing. Crack, crack, crack. And Measle saw that as the thing flew in wide circles, it was steadily descending towards the square. "It's here," he said. There was no reply from the other side of the room. Measle turned his head and saw that everybody in the group was pressed against the far wall, their eyes wide with fear. "It can't get in here, can it?" he asked. "I don't think so," said Lady Grant. Measle could hear the terror in her voice. "I've hidden here lots of times, and I'm sure it knew I was here," she said. Measle turned back to the window, lowering his head so that only his eyes showed over the sill. The bat was making one last low-level circle of the square. It was huge. Now Measle could see the black fur on its underside. He caught a glimpse of its enormous ears, tilted forward and moving from left to right as the creature strained to listen for its prey. Then, with a sudden flurry of its wings, it landed in the square. For a second, it was still, and then it began to move across the square towards the town hall. And look, there's the bat there. Horrible, nasty looking thing, isn't it? I wonder what kind of bat it is. I don't think it's a real one. All the same, I wouldn't like to see that. The way it moved was so alien that Measle closed his eyes for a second, hoping he hadn't seen what he'd seen. Normal bats, he knew, have a difficult time moving on land. They have to lie flat and pull themselves along with the little claws on their wings. Not this bat, if it was a bat. This creature stood on a pair of scaly legs, and it walked on them like a huge bird. There was a scraping sound as its massive talons dragged across the sandpaper grass, then a sudden clattering noise as a great claw knocked the Bengal tiger to one side. The tiger rolled over several times and then crashed into the house at the base of the statue. The bat took no notice. It came on, its head jerking back and forth, walking like a pigeon. It was getting close to Measle's window. He lowered his head even further until only one eye was peeking over the edge. There was a strong smell now too, the smell of a mouse cage that hasn't been cleaned in a long time. The bat loomed huge against the window. Its head was taller than the roof of the town hall, and had to bend its body low to put its face to the glass. The enormous head filled the whole space, and the eyes, blood red and slanting upwards at the corners, were the size of dinner plates. Its nose looked like a pig's snout, except that it was in the shape of a triangular leaf. The tip of the nose wriggled like a pig's, and below the nose there was a wide, lipless mouth, slightly open so that Measle could see 2 rows of needle-sharp yellow teeth. Its breath steamed up the glass on the outside, but through the fog in the window, Measle could see that its eyes, just a couple of metres away from where he crouched, were not looking at him. They seemed to be peering into the room, darting this way and that, never focusing on anything in particular. Tinker barked. Somebody screamed. At first, Measle thought it was Kitty. He turned quickly and saw that the sharp sound of fear had come from Lady Grant. Her hand was over her mouth, and her eyes were wide and staring with terror. "Shh!" Measle whispered fiercely. "It'll hear us." "It's heard us already," hissed Kip. "Its ears are amazing, it can hear our hearts beating." "Don't let it get me," muttered Lady Grant through her fingers. There was a noise behind Measle, and he turned back to the window. One of the bat's long claws was scraping down the glass of the window. "It's getting in," yelled William, jerking his arm so violently that the 2 armrests of his book chair spilled to the floor with a thud. Lady Grant screamed again. Measle saw to his horror that the glass was bending under the pressure from the great claw, and he scrambled backwards on all fours until he reached the group that were huddled against the far wall. "It can smell us too," whispered Frank. "So many of us in all one place, and no longer made of plastic. I can't believe it's luck." They waited, holding their breath. The bending pane of glass cracked with the sound of a pistol shot, and then light suddenly flooded the darkness. It wasn't sunlight, which was a hard, bright, white quality to it. This light was a yellowish colour. It was far less penetrating, but it was enough for the bat to turn its hideous face away from the window, and a moment later they saw it back away from the front of the building in a hurried, scrambling sort of way. It seemed to crouch for a second, then it sprang into the air. They could hear the crack, crack, crack of its leathery wings receding into the distance. Everybody breathed a sigh of relief, and Kitty, who had crawled as close to Measle as she could, said in a small voice, "Is it gone?" "Looks like it," said Measle. "But where's that light coming from?" "It's the overhead bulb," said Frank. "The one that hangs down in the ceiling over the train set." "More trouble," said Kip in a low voice. "Out of the frying pan and into the fire," said William. "It's Basil," said Prudence, nervously pushing a lock of grey hair off her forehead. "He's here, and he's going to wonder where we all are." They waited, listening to the long silence. Then came Basil's voice like a thunderclap directly overhead. "What is this?" It was so loud that a little dust that had collected on the ceiling of the town hall was shaken free by the vibration and drifted slowly down through the still air. "What has been going on here? Where are my special little victims?" There was another pause, and then Basil's voice again, quieter this time, a kind of vicious whisper which sounded like wind whistling in a chimney. "This is your doing, isn't it, Measle? You found all my special little plasticated victims, and you've hidden them somewhere, haven't you? Now, where could you have hidden them, And why? There's a question for you. Why would you do such a thing? I want my little victims back where they belong, Measle. So, why don't you come out of your hiding place and tell me where you've put them? I won't hurt you, Measle, not if you're quick. Come along now. Show yourself." "What should I do?" whispered Measle. "Stay put," muttered Frank. "He doesn't know where you are. He's not about to tear his beloved train set apart to find you." "I wonder about something," whisked Basil's voice. "I wonder why, when I came in and switched on the light, why my little furry friend just happened to be peering in through the windows of the town hall. Why would Cuddlebug do that, do you suppose? That's his name, you know. Cuddlebug. Such a dear little chap. He and I are the very best of friends. He keeps this place so clean, not a living thing in sight. Could it be that Cuddlebug knows something that I don't? Could it be that there's something hiding in the town hall? Something that Cuddlebug would like to eat, Well, shall I shall have to get my torch, won't I? I shall have to shine it into the town hall and see what there is to be seen." He heard Basil moving away. Measle knew where the torch was. It hung on a hook right by the attic door. "He's going to be back in a second," he said urgently. "What are we going to do?" "He mustn't know we're alive," said Prudence. "There's no telling what he'll do to us." "Quick, everybody," said Frank. "Get into the same positions, the one we were in when we were plastic. It's our only hope, Measle. Try and hide behind us. Come on, everybody, huddle close and together." Within a few seconds, everybody had crowded together and adopted their statue positions. Lady Grant was crouched, huddling on the floor. William was posed as if running for his life. Kitty had her arms wrapped around in an imaginary pine tree, and all positioned as Basil had set them. All except Tinker, who, being a dog, couldn't understand what was going on. He whined and pushed his nose against his stiff hands, trying to nuzzle everybody back to life. "Grab him, Measle," said Frank. "Try to keep him quiet." Measle took a hold of Tinker's collar and pulled him into the narrow space behind the grouped figures. He crouched down, his back to the wall, pulling Tinker down next to him. He put his hand round Tinker's nose and whispered, "Be quiet now, Tinker. That's a good boy. Not a sound, Tinker." The little dog seemed to sense the urgency in Measle's voice, and he lay quietly by his side, his head on his paws. He quite liked the smelly kid's hand on his nose. The smelly kid's hand was a nice and grubby and smelt very interesting. A bit too much scent of that nasty orange rooty thing that they'd shoved down his throat earlier. But the rest was very appealing. Mixture of soot and sweat and friendly boy. And a trace of doughnut in there too. Yeah, very pleasant indeedy-doody. They all heard Basil's footsteps coming closer. They all saw the beam of bright light flashing across the tall windows of the town hall. They all heard his voice. Now then, let us see what is so interesting to my furry little friend. The blinding light flooded over them, and Frank whispered through clenched teeth, Everybody be still, not twitch from anybody. There was a gap of about 1/2 centimetre between Lady Grant and William, and Measle could see the window through the little space. He was in deep shadow, and felt sure that Basil wouldn't be able to catch sight of him, so he felt safe in peering through the narrow gap. He kept a firm hand on Tinker's nose. He saw the torch sweeping across the window, and then he saw Basil's enormous eye next to it. Well, 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 hissed Basil. There they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All present and correct. No, I'm mistaken. Where is the little dog? And where is young Measle? What a puzzle it is, to be sure. All my tiny victims, but no dog and no Measle. Perhaps you've been eaten, Measle. Is that it? Did my furry friend get you? Did Cuddlebug carry you off to his lair in the rafters, On second thoughts, I think not. Not you, Measle. No, you're far too crafty for that, aren't you? So, where are you? And look, there's Basil looking through the window of the town hall. He's massive, isn't he? And where's the dog? Are you together, perhaps? Are you hiding somewhere else with a plastic dog for a little companion? How sad, Measle. You and a little plastic dog. Basil's enormous eye withdrew, and a moment later the bright beam of the torch disappeared, plunging them back into semi-darkness. Now there was only the sickly light from the bare overhead bulb. Basil's voice, high above them now, boomed, Well, we shall look for you tomorrow, Measle. Tomorrow, in daytime, when the light is better, and we shall get our long tweezers, and we shall take all my little victims out of the town hall and put them back where they belong. And we shall find you, Measle. We shall find you and your little plastic dog, and we shall punish you for rearranging my train set. Because nobody but me is allowed to play with my train set, Basil. Nobody but me. In it, yes. With it, no. Good night. And sleep tight. Basil sniggered. Then there was the thud, thud, thud of Basil's heavy footsteps moving towards the door. A click of a switch and the yellow light disappeared, followed by the distinct thump of the attic door was closed. Everybody was still. Only when they heard the distant sound of Basil moving down the attic staircase did they drop their posed positions and relax. We've got a problem, said Frank. A worse problem than we had before. We've got to hide young Measle so that Basil can't find him. In fact, we've all got to hide. We can't keep up this statue act, not in broad daylight. But Measle has to hide most of all. We need him, and there's no telling what that Wrathmonk would do to him. Lady Grant sniffed. But there's nowhere to hide. You know that. I mean, as big a table. Certainly. But that revolting tramplebone could examine every inch of it in a few minutes. Besides, said William, we can't leave this place, not at night. Not with that thing in the hunt for us. And my books can't help with a thing like that. There's nowhere for us to go, whimpered Lady Grant. There was a long, gloomy silence. Then Kitty whispered, We could be like termites. What? Said Measle. Termites. You know, you hardly ever see termites. Oh, what was that, dear? Whispered Prudence. Kitty looked at Measle, as though she was asking him to explain to the rest of them. She said something about termites, muttered Weasel. Termites? Said Lady Grant, sounding irritable. What is the dear girl talking about? What are termites? Ah, well now, according to my encyclopedia, they're a kind of ant, said William, in the sort of voice people use when they've learned something by heart. Their main diet is wood. In the process of eating it, they can produce extensive burrows, and they live in large colonies. There's a queen who lays eggs, and oh, said Kip, slowly. There's a great idea. What idea? Said Lady Grant. What are we talking about ants for? Kip smiled. Not ants. Termites. Termites burrow. They make tunnels in wood. Long, twisting tunnels which keep them safe and out of sight, out of harm's way. I should know. I've seen enough evidence of them in my line of work. How horrid for you, said Lady Grant crossly. But what have they got to do with us? Everything, said Kip. He turned to Kitty. You're a very clever girl. There you go. So that was chapter 5, The Thing. What do you think of Cuttlebug? What a horrible name for a bat, if he even is a bat. Big scary thing too. And the fact that he's Basil's pet, well, that's not going to be any good for any of them. Well, tune in next time for chapter 6, The Tunnel. This is where that comparison to termites comes in pretty handy. If you like this episode, tune in for the next one. Thanks very much for your time. Stay home, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.